6,000 meters above Berlin. April 20th, 1945. 15:42 hours, Central European Time. Oberleutnant Hans Berger is flying a Messerschmitt Bf 109 G14 at 420 kilometers per hour when the fuel pressure gauge drops to zero. The Daimler-Benz DB605 engine continues running on the fuel remaining in the lines. This will last approximately 90 seconds. Above him, 30 Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses are approaching from the west at 7,000 meters. Their target is the Tempelhof Railway marshalling yards. Berger's squadron has been destroyed, his wingman is dead, the radio is silent, he is alone. His fuel is gone. The bombers are 2 minutes from the target. The engine does not falter immediately. It continues to produce power, drawing from the residual fuel in the injection system and the lines connecting the tank to the engine. But the mathematics are absolute. Without fuel pressure, the engine will starve. When it starves, the aircraft becomes a glider, with a glide ratio of approximately 12:1. From 6,000 meters, Berger can glide 72 kilometers. This is enough to reach an airfield. But the airfield is east. The bombers are west. If he turns east now, the bombers will reach their target unopposed. If you appreciate these detailed accounts of aviation history, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. And in the comments below, let us know where you're listening from. Now, let's understand why this mission mattered. The strategic context in April of 1945 is one of collapse. The Third Reich is contracting on all fronts. Soviet forces have encircled Berlin from the east and south. American and British forces have crossed the Rhine and are advancing from the west. The Luftwaffe, once the most formidable air force in Europe, is reduced to fragments. Fuel is critically short. Spare parts are unavailable. Experienced pilots are dead or captured. Replacement pilots arrive with minimal training and die within days. The few operational fighters that remain are dispersed across improvised airfields, flying against overwhelming numerical superiority. Berlin is being bombed daily. The United States Army Air Forces conduct daylight raids. The Royal Air Force conducts night raids. The raids target whatever infrastructure remains: rail yards, factories, government buildings, communication centers. The effectiveness of these raids is debatable. Most of Berlin's war production has already been destroyed or relocated. The transportation network is in ruins. The civilian population is sheltering in basements and subway tunnels. But the raids continue because the strategic bombing doctrine does not account for diminishing returns. The bombers fly because they have always flown. The defense of Berlin in April of 1945 is assigned to Jagdgeschwader 1, a fighter wing equipped primarily with Bf 109s and a few Fokker, Wolf W190s. The wing is under strength. On paper, it consists of 3 groups with a combined strength of 120 aircraft. In practice, fewer than 30 aircraft are operational on any given day. The remainder are grounded due to mechanical failure, lack of fuel, or lack of pilots. The operational aircraft are flown by a mix of veterans with hundreds of combat hours and replacements with fewer than 20. Oberleutnant Hans Berger is a veteran. He joined the Luftwaffe in 1939 at the age of 18. He was motivated by the same factors that motivated thousands of young Germans: economic opportunity, national pride, and the belief that military service offered advancement. The Luftwaffe offered all of these. He was sent to flight training school at Schleißheim, where he learned to fly the Buckerboo 131 Jungmann biplane. He soloed after 8 hours. His instructor noted that Berger had good situational awareness and did not fixate on a single task. These qualities are essential for fighter pilots, who must divide attention between the aircraft, the enemy, and the tactical situation. He completed basic training in February of 1940 and advanced to fighter training at Vernuken. He transitioned to the Bf 109E3, learning air combat tactics and gunnery. The training emphasized aggression, speed, and the exploitation of the Bf-29's superior climb rate and armament. Berger was a capable student. He was not exceptional. His gunnery scores were average. His aerobatics were competent, but he absorbed the tactical doctrine and applied it consistently. This consistency kept him alive. He was posted to WWII in May of 1940 and flew his first combat mission during the Battle of France. His target was a formation of French bombers over the Somme. He damaged one bomber, but did not observe it crash. He returned to base without incident. This established a pattern. Over the next 5 years, Berger flew 437 combat missions. He was credited with 11 confirmed kills and 16 probables. He was not an ace by Luftwaffe standards, which required 5 confirmed kills. But he survived when 80% of his peers did not. Survival in the Luftwaffe by 1945 required a specific combination of skill, caution, and luck. Skill meant mastering the aircraft and the tactics. Caution meant avoiding unnecessary risk and disengaging when outnumbered. Luck meant being in the right position when the enemy made a mistake and being in the wrong position when the enemy did not. Berger had all three. He was skilled enough to exploit opportunities. He was cautious enough to avoid traps. And he was lucky enough that his aircraft did not fail at critical moments, until today. The mission briefing on April 20th occurs at 1400 hours. The intelligence officer reports that American heavy bombers are expected over Berlin between 1530 and 1600 hours. The target is believed to be the Tempelhof railway yards. Fire interception is ordered. All available aircraft will launch. The weather is clear with scattered cloud at 4,000 meters. Visibility is 15 kilometers. Wind is from the west at 20 kilometers per hour. Temperature at 6,000 meters is minus 15 degrees Celsius. Berger's aircraft is Bf-109G14, work number 785342, marked with yellow 11 on the fuselage. The aircraft has 147 flight hours since its last major overhaul. The Daimler-Benz DB605 engine is in adequate condition. The armament consists of one 30mm Mk108 cannon firing through the propeller hub and two 13mm MG131 machine guns mounted above the engine. The cannon carries 60 rounds. The machine guns carry 300 rounds each. Fuel capacity is 400 liters, enough for approximately 90 minutes of flight at cruise settings. Berger walks to his aircraft at 1500 hours. The airfield is a former highway converted to emergency use. The surface is cracked asphalt. The aircraft are parked under trees to avoid detection from the air. Ground crew are scarce. Berger conducts his own pre-flight inspection. The control surfaces are intact. The tires are worn but serviceable. The propeller blades show minor nicks but are balanced. He climbs into the cockpit and straps in. The crew chief, an elderly Luftwaffe sergeant recalled from retirement, helps him connect the oxygen and radio leads. The engine start is normal. Berger primes the cylinders, sets the mixture to rich, cracks the throttle, and engages the starter. The DB605 coughs twice and fires. It runs rough for 15 seconds, then smooths out. The oil pressure climbs to normal. The coolant temperature is within limits. He signals ready. The other aircraft in his flight are starting. There are 4 Bf-10-9s in total. This is the entire operational strength of the unit on this day. Takeoff occurs at 1523 hours. The 4 aircraft taxi to the improvised runway and launch in pairs at 20-second intervals. Berger is number 3. He advances the throttle and the Bf-109 accelerates. The tail lifts at 100 kilometers per hour. Liftoff occurs at 170. He retracts the landing gear and flaps, climbs to 1,000 meters, and joins formation with the lead aircraft. The flight sets course west toward Berlin. The flight time to the intercept point is 14 minutes. The formation climbs to 6,000 meters and maintains 420 kilometers per hour. The sky is clear. Visibility is excellent. Berger can see Berlin ahead, a sprawl of ruins and smoke. The city has been burning for weeks. The bombers are not yet visible. The flight leader calls out positions every 30 seconds, scanning for enemy fighters. The American bombers are escorted by P-51 Mustangs. The Mustangs have superior range, speed, and numbers. Engaging them is usually fatal. At 1537, the bombers appear. They are approaching from the west at 7,000 meters, 1,000 meters above the German fighters. The formation is tight, approximately 30 B-17s in a combat box. The escorts are visible, P-51s weaving above and to the sides of the bombers. The flight leader makes a decision. He will ignore the escorts and attack the bombers from below. This tactic exploits the B-17's blind spot beneath the fuselage and minimizes exposure to escort fighters. The risk is that the escorts will dive on the German fighters during the attack. The flight leader accepts this risk because there is no alternative. The 4 Bf-29s climb toward the bomber formation. At 1540, the escorts spot them and begin diving. The flight leader calls for the attack to proceed. Speed is essential. The German fighters must reach the bombers before the escorts intercept them. Berger advances his throttle to maximum continuous power. The airspeed increases to 500 kilometers per hour. The distance to the bombers closes rapidly. At 1541, the lead Bf-29 opens fire on the bomber formation. Berger sees tracer rounds arc toward a B-17 on the formation's edge. The B-17's defensive gunners return fire. The sky fills with tracers. The escorts are now 300 meters above and diving. The flight leader's aircraft shudders and begins trailing smoke. He has been hit. He breaks left and dives. Berger does not see what happens next. He is focused on his own attack run. At 1542, Berger lines up on a B-17 in the lower left of the formation. His gun sight is tracking the bomber's fuselage. He closes to 400 meters and fires a 2-second burst. The 30mm cannon and the machine guns fire simultaneously. He sees strikes on the B-17's wing root. The wing shudders but does not separate. The bomber continues flying. Berger breaks right to avoid the return fire from the bomber's gunners and to evade the escorts diving toward him. As he brakes, the fuel pressure gauge drops to 0. The needle falls instantly. Berger's eyes move to the fuel quantity gauge. It reads empty. This is not possible. He fueled the aircraft himself. 400 liters, 90 minutes of endurance. He has been airborne for 19 minutes. He should have 300 liters remaining. He does not have time to analyze the cause. The engine is still running, but it will not run for long. He estimates 90 seconds before fuel starvation. He has 3 options. He can turn east and attempt to glide to an airfield. He can bail out immediately, or he can continue the attack and bail out when the engine fails. The first option is procedurally correct. Fuel exhaustion is an emergency that requires immediate action to preserve the aircraft and pilot. The second option is safer for the pilot, but wastes the aircraft. The third option maximizes the tactical effect, but increases risk. Berger chooses the third option. This is not heroism. This is a calculation. One fighter cannot stop 30 bombers, but one fighter can force the bombers to maneuver, disrupt their formation, and potentially cause them to abort the attack. The value of disruption exceeds the value of one pilot. He keys the radio and transmits, Yellow 11, fuel system failure, continuing attack. No one acknowledges. The radio is silent, or the other pilots are dead, or they are too engaged to respond. Berger does not repeat the transmission. He turns back toward the bombers. The escorts are now between him and the bombers. 2 P-51s are 300 meters ahead and closing. They have seen him and are maneuvering to intercept. Berger does not engage them. He cannot afford the fuel or the time. He dives below them, using gravity to maintain speed. The engine is still producing power, but he can feel it beginning to hesitate. The fuel in the lines is nearly exhausted. He climbs back toward the bomber formation from below. The bombers have not changed course. They are still heading toward the target. Berger lines up on a B-17 in the center of the formation. He closes to 300 meters. The bomber's gunners open fire. Tracer rounds pass above and below his aircraft. He ignores them. His focus is on the gun sight and the bomber's fuselage. At 250 meters, he fires. The cannon and machine guns fire in a sustained burst. He sees strikes on the bomber's wing and fuselage. The bomber's number 3 engine begins trailing smoke. The engine does not catch fire. The bomber continues flying. Berger's ammunition counter shows 30 rounds remaining in the cannon and 100 rounds in each machine gun. He has enough for one more burst. At this moment, the engine fails. The fuel in the injection system is exhausted. The DB-605 does not sputter or cough, it simply stops. The propeller continues windmilling, driven by the slipstream, but it produces no thrust. The sudden loss of power causes the Bf-109 to decelerate. The airspeed drops from 480 kilometers per hour to 400. Berger pushes the nose down to maintain flying speed. The aircraft begins to descend. The escorts see this. They interpret it as a damaged aircraft and close in for the kill. 2 P-51s are diving toward him from above. Berger has no engine power to evade. He has no altitude to trade for speed. He has only inertia and gravity. He uses both. He rolls inverted and pulls through into a steep dive. This maneuver uses gravity to accelerate the aircraft and makes him a harder target. The dive angle is 60 degrees. The airspeed builds quickly. 420 kilometers per hour, 450, 500. The escorts follow, but they are behind him and closing slowly. The Bf-109 in a dive is fast. At 5,000 meters, Berger pulls out of the dive. The G-forces are approximately 5. He feels the pressure in his chest and legs. His vision begins to narrow. He eases the pull to avoid blacking out. The airspeed is now 520 kilometers per hour. This is enough for one more attack. He climbs back toward the bombers. The formation is now directly above him at 7,000 meters. He is at 5,500 meters and climbing in a glide. The Bf-109's glide ratio is 12:1. From 5,500 meters, he can gain approximately 460 meters of altitude by trading speed for height. This will bring him to 6,000 meters, 1,000 meters below the bombers. Close enough for a firing pass, but not close enough to reach them before the escorts intercept. Berger does not care about the escorts. He continues climbing. At 6,000 meters, his airspeed has dropped to 300 kilometers per hour. This is near stall speed for the Bf-109 at this altitude. The aircraft is mushing through the air. The controls are sloppy, and the stall warning is buffeting the stick. He is 500 meters below the bombers and 1 kilometer behind. The escorts are now 300 meters away and closing. He fires his remaining ammunition at the bomber formation. The range is excessive. The effective range of the Mk-108 cannon is 400 meters. He is firing from 600 meters. The probability of a hit is near 0, but the probability is not 0. The cannon fires 20 rounds. The machine guns fire 100 rounds each. The tracers arc upward toward the bombers. Berger does not observe any hits. The ammunition is exhausted. The guns are empty. The Bf-109 stalls. The airspeed drops below 280 kilometers per hour, and the aircraft stops flying. The nose drops. Berger pushes the stick forward to recover, but there is no engine power to accelerate. The aircraft enters a descending spiral. He does not fight it. He allows the nose to drop and the airspeed to build. At 4,000 meters, the airspeed reaches 300 kilometers per hour, and the aircraft is flying again. The escorts break off. They have seen the Bf-29 stall and descend. They assume it is finished. Pursuing a gliding aircraft is not worth the fuel. They rejoin the bomber formation. Berger is alone. He is now at 4,000 meters with no engine power and no ammunition. The bomber formation is above him at 7,000 meters, continuing toward the target. He has failed to stop them, but he has disrupted them. The formation leader has seen a lone fighter making repeated attacks. The defensive gunners have expended ammunition. The escort fighters have been drawn away from their positions. The cumulative effect is a slight delay in the bomb run. Slight delays accumulate into targeting errors. Targeting errors reduce the effectiveness of the raid. This is the arithmetic of air defense. One fighter cannot stop 30 bombers, but one fighter can reduce the effectiveness of 30 bombers by a small percentage. Aggregate that reduction over dozens of raids, and the effect becomes measurable. This is why Berger continued the attack after the fuel system failed. Not because it would change the outcome of this raid, but because it might change the aggregate outcome of many raids. He now focuses on survival. He is at 4,000 meters above Berlin. The airfield he launched from is 15 kilometers east. From 4,000 meters, he can glide 48 kilometers. This is sufficient. But gliding 48 kilometers requires selecting the correct heading and maintaining the optimal glide speed. The optimal glide speed for the Bf-109 is 280 kilometers per hour. Faster, and the increased drag reduces range. Slower, and the aircraft descends too steeply. Berger trims the aircraft for 280 kilometers per hour and sets his heading east. The city passes beneath him. He can see the ruins clearly from this altitude. Entire neighborhoods are flattened. The streets are craters. Smoke rises from fires that have been burning for days. The Spree River is visible, reflecting the afternoon sun. He uses the river as a navigation reference. The airfield is 5 kilometers north of the river. He adjusts his heading slightly. At 2,000 meters, he realizes he will not reach the airfield. The glide distance is adequate, but the altitude is insufficient. The airfield requires a landing approach from 1,000 meters to clear the trees and buildings on the approach path. He is now at 2,000 meters and still 8 kilometers from the airfield. The mathematics indicate he will arrive at 300 meters altitude. This is too low. He looks for an alternative. Below him is the Tiergarten, Berlin's Central Park. The park is approximately 2 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide. It is heavily damaged by bombing, but portions remain open. A forced landing in the park is survivable if he can find a clear area. The alternative is attempting to reach the airfield and undershooting into the buildings and trees. The first option is survivable. The second is not. He turns toward the Tiergarten. At 1,000 meters altitude, he can see the park clearly. Most of it is cratered and covered with debris, but the eastern section has a clear strip, approximately 400 meters long and 50 meters wide. This is adequate. The Bf-219 requires 300 meters to land without power. Berger aims for the strip. At 500 meters, he lowers the landing gear and flaps. The gear extends under gravity. The hydraulic system is unpowered, but the gear falls into place and locks. The flaps extend partially. Without hydraulic pressure, they do not extend fully. Partial flaps are better than no flaps. The aircraft's landing speed increases from 140 kilometers per hour to 160. This is manageable. At 300 meters, he is lined up with the strip. The approach is stable. The airspeed is 165 kilometers per hour. The rate of descent is 5 meters per second. He flares at 10 meters. The nose rises. The airspeed decreases. The main gear touches at 150 kilometers per hour. The impact is hard, but not violent. The gear does not collapse. The aircraft rolls forward. The surface is rough. The Bf-109 bounces and skids. Berger applies the brakes, but without engine power, the brake pressure is minimal. The aircraft slows, but not quickly. Ahead, the clear strip ends in a pile of rubble. The distance is 100 meters. The airspeed is 80 kilometers per hour. He will not stop in time. He steers left toward a section of open ground. The left main gear strikes a crater edge. The gear collapses. The left wing drops and strikes the ground. The aircraft slews left and comes to a stop. The propeller is bent. The left wing is damaged. The fuselage is intact. Berger sits in the cockpit and unbuckles his harness. He climbs out and jumps to the ground. He is not injured. The aircraft is damaged but not destroyed. He walks 20 meters away and sits on a pile of rubble. He lights a cigarette. He does not carry cigarettes, but he finds a pack in his flight suit pocket. He does not remember putting them there. He smokes and watches the aircraft. No fire starts. The fuel tanks are empty. There is nothing to burn. After 5 minutes, he stands and walks toward the city center. He does not wait for recovery crews. There are no recovery crews. The Luftwaffe infrastructure in Berlin has collapsed. Aircraft are abandoned where they land. Pilots walk back to their units or they do not. Berger walks east toward the airfield. The distance is approximately 8 kilometers. He is wearing his flight suit and boots. He carries no weapon. The streets are filled with civilians and soldiers. No one pays attention to him. A pilot walking through Berlin in April of 1945 is not unusual. Thousands of aircrew are stranded in the city. Some are awaiting reassignment. Some are hiding. Some are simply lost. He reaches the airfield at 17:30 hours. The airfield is deserted. The remaining aircraft are gone. The fuel trucks are gone. The ground crew is gone. The operations building is empty. Berger finds a note on the commander's desk. The note states that the unit has relocated to an airfield near Dresden. There is no transportation. Personnel are instructed to make their own way. Berger does not go to Dresden. He walks back into the city. Over the next 10 days, he remains in Berlin as the Soviet forces encircle and assault the city. He does not fly again. There are no aircraft. On April 30th, he is captured by Soviet troops in the Tiergarten, 100 meters from where he landed his Bf-109. He is interrogated, determined to be a combatant, and sent to a prisoner of war camp in Siberia. He spends 3 years in captivity. He is released in 1948 and returns to Germany. The analysis of Berger's fuel system failure is conducted after the war using Luftwaffe maintenance records recovered by Allied forces. The records indicate that Bf-29 G14, work number 78F342, had a documented history of fuel tank leaks. The self-sealing fuel tanks in the Bf-29 are made of rubber and fabric. When punctured by gunfire, the rubber swells and seals the hole. But the rubber degrades over time, especially when exposed to high temperatures and fuel vapors. By April of 1945, most Bf-1009s in service have fuel systems that leak chronically. The specific failure in Berger's aircraft is traced to a deteriorated seal in the fuel tank. The seal failed during the high G pullout from the dive at 1541. The failure created a leak that drained the tank in approximately 90 seconds. The fuel was not consumed by the engine. It was venting overboard through the failed seal. Berger's fuel quantity gauge read empty because the tank was empty. The gauge was accurate. The fuel was simply gone. This failure mode was known to Luftwaffe maintenance personnel, but could not be addressed due to lack of replacement parts. Fuel tank seals were not available. New tanks were not available. The deteriorating aircraft were kept in service because there was no alternative. The result was a high rate of fuel system failures. Records indicate that approximately 12% of Bf-109 sorties in April of 1945 ended in forced landings due to fuel exhaustion. Berger's sortie was statistically routine. The tactical impact of Berger's final attack is negligible. The 30 B-17s reached their target and dropped their bombs. The Tempelhof railway yards were struck. The damage was minimal because the yards had already been destroyed in previous raids. The bombers returned to their base in England without loss. The P-51 escorts did not claim any victories during this mission. The Luftwaffe lost 4 aircraft, including Berger's. The exchange rate favored the Allies overwhelmingly. But the mission illustrates a principle that is often overlooked in analyses of air warfare: the value of persistence. Berger's attacks did not stop the bombers. They did not inflict significant damage. They did not alter the strategic situation. But they forced the bomber formation to maintain defensive vigilance. They consumed escort fighter fuel. They introduced uncertainty into the bomb run. These effects are small and difficult to measure, but they are real. The cumulative effect of hundreds of such attacks, conducted by doomed pilots flying degraded aircraft with inadequate fuel and ammunition, created a persistent defensive presence that could not be ignored. The Allied bomber crews could not assume safe passage over Germany, even in April of 1945, when the Luftwaffe was effectively destroyed. This persistence imposed costs, psychological stress, fuel consumption, ammunition expenditure, and navigational caution. These costs did not change the outcome of the war, but they were costs nonetheless. Berger did not think in these terms. He thought in terms of procedure. The procedure was to intercept enemy bombers. He intercepted them. The procedure was to attack. He attacked. When the fuel system failed, he continued attacking because the procedure did not specify that fuel exhaustion was grounds for disengagement. The procedure specified that attacks would continue until ammunition was exhausted or the aircraft was no longer flyable. He followed the procedure. After the war, Berger returned to civilian life and worked as a mechanic. He did not fly again. When asked about his wartime service, he described it in factual terms. He flew fighters. He engaged enemy bombers. He was captured by Soviet forces. He did not describe his final sortie as exceptional. He described it as a fuel system failure that ended in a forced landing. This description is accurate. The Bf-209 he landed in the Tiergarten was discovered by Soviet forces on May 2, 1945, 3 days after the fall of Berlin. The aircraft was photographed and then scrapped. The photographs show the damaged left wing and the collapsed landing gear. The fuselage is intact. The markings are visible, yellow 11. The photographs are archived in the Central Museum of the Great Patriotic War in Moscow. Researchers can view them by requesting access to the German aircraft collection. Most researchers do not request access. The collection contains hundreds of similar photographs. No other records of Berger's final sortie exist. The unit war diary ends on April 15th. The mission log for April 20th is missing. The other 3 pilots who flew with Berger did not survive to file reports. The American bomber crews did not observe anything unusual during the mission. Their reports note routine flak and fighter opposition. No specific encounters are documented. The mission was classified as successful. Berger's account of the sortie, recorded during his interrogation by Soviet intelligence officers in May of 1945, is the only primary source. The interrogation report is terse. It states that Berger flew a defensive patrol over Berlin, engaged American bombers, experienced fuel system failure, and made a forced landing in the Tiergarten. The report does not mention that he continued attacking after fuel exhaustion. The Soviet interrogators were interested in Luftwaffe tactics and organization, not individual heroics. The strategic irrelevance of Berger's final sortie is absolute. One pilot attacking 30 bombers with a failing aircraft did not alter the outcome of the air war over Germany. It did not delay the fall of Berlin. It did not save civilian lives. It accomplished nothing measurable. But the act itself is worth examining because it reveals the logic of continuation under hopeless circumstances. Berger continued because the procedure required it. The Luftwaffe's defensive doctrine in 1945 was based on the principle of maximum effort. Every available fighter would engage every bomber formation regardless of odds. This doctrine was operationally absurd. The Luftwaffe lacked the resources to sustain maximum effort. But the doctrine persisted because it was the only doctrine available. Changing doctrine requires time, planning, and institutional capacity. The Luftwaffe in April of 1945 had none of these. So pilots like Berger followed the doctrine as written. They launched against overwhelming opposition. They engaged without adequate fuel or ammunition. They continued attacking even when the aircraft was failing. This was not fanaticism. It was procedure. The procedure had been established when the Luftwaffe was strong. It remained in effect when the Luftwaffe was weak. The pilots followed it because following procedure is what pilots do. The cost of this procedural persistence was high. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 500 fighters in April of 1945. Most of these losses were due to fuel exhaustion, mechanical failure, or pilot error rather than combat. Berger's forced landing was typical. The pilots survived the combat, but not the flight home. This attrition did not affect the war's outcome because the war's outcome was already determined. but it consumed the remaining human and material resources of the Luftwaffe. Berger understood this. He was not ignorant of the strategic situation. He knew the war was lost. He knew that his attacks were futile. But he also knew that futility is not grounds for abandoning procedure. Procedure exists to guide action when outcomes are uncertain. When outcomes are certain, procedure is all that remains. The sky over Berlin in April of 1945 was filled with aircraft, bombers, fighters, transports, reconnaissance planes. The sky is empty now. The bombers are in museums or scrapyards. The fighters are in museums or scrapyards. The pilots are dead. The city has been rebuilt. The Tiergarten has been replanted. The railway yards have been repaired and demolished and rebuilt again. If you stand in the Tiergarten today, you see trees and paths and memorials. You do not see the crater where a Bef-29 landed with an empty fuel tank and a bent propeller. The crater was filled decades ago. The surface is grass. There is no marker indicating that a pilot continued an attack for 90 seconds after his fuel ran out, not because it would change anything, but because the procedure required it. This is what remains. Records in archives, photographs in collections, interrogation reports in Cyrillic script. The physical evidence is gone. The men are gone. What persists is the knowledge that competence under hopeless circumstances is still competence, and that following procedure, when procedure is all you have, is not heroism, but simply the continuation of function. Berger did his job until the aircraft stopped flying. Then he walked away. This is what pilots do.